Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and get started this afternoon. My name is Courtney Martinez. I'm one of the advisors in the pre-health and pre-law office here at UCF. And today we're going to be talking about academic expectations for pre-health students, specifically freshmen and sophomore. So what expectations should you have of yourself as a pre-health student in your first and second years at the university level? We were supposed to Instagram live this today. We're just gonna do a regular video recording instead, and we'll post the video afterwards. We do have a YouTube page and the rest of our social media, so if you did have any friends that were planning on watching on Instagram live, they're just gonna have to kind of watch it afterwards since the internet's down. So who is pre-health? We always like to start with this just to make sure that everybody is in the right place. This is a nice graphic of all of the pre-health professions that we advise on in pre-health and pre-law. By show of hands, actually since it's a small group of you, we'll just kind of go around the room and let me know what profession you're planning on going into. So we'll start with you.
I'm planning on going to med school.
To med school? Perfect.
And I'm also going for an MD.
MD?
Or pre-med.
Pre-med?
Pharmacy.
Pharmacy, okay. And then
MD.
MD?
Yeah.
Perfect. So a lot of med students and then one pharmacy. All of you guys definitely fall within the pre-health professions, and then anybody else within PT, OT, etc. These are kind of the programs that we're specifically talking about. And today we're going to go over how to choose a major, what major is important for med school, pharmacy school, the importance of your GPA, how much weight does it really hold, how important is it? Common prerequisite courses, so what classes do you need to make sure you're taking in order to be eligible to apply? Starting an upward trend, we'll talk about what that means. And the Student Academic Resource Center. And then finally, the admissions exam for your health profession. So, jumping right in, choosing a major. What major do you need to have in order to go to medical school?
There's no set major.
Exactly. And it's the same holds true for pharmacy school. There's no set major that you need to be in order to go into any of these programs after you graduate from UCF. Really what these schools care about, the admissions committee for med school, pharmacy school, they're looking at your GPA and they're looking at the classes you've taken, prerequisite courses. The reason why that's the case is because majors are kind of subjective a little bit. You can have biomed sciences here at UCF, biomed sciences at USF, and biomed sciences at University of Florida. And they're gonna be a different combination of classes at each university, right? So the university kind of picks which classes fall in a major. They're all gonna be relatively similar because it's a similar discipline. You should receive a similar education, but the exact courses may differ a little bit. So that's why medical schools, pharmacy schools don't say you need to be biomed in order to go into that profession. They specify the courses, so it's kind of a standardization across the board for all students, regardless of which school you went to, which major you had, etc. Does that make sense? So the correct answer is any major. We talked about this a little bit, prereq courses, not specific majors. And then the other thing is to choose something that you're interested in. So in order to get a good grade in a class, you probably have to study a lot, put a lot of work into that course. You're gonna be a lot more motivated to do that if it's something that you really wanna learn about versus something you're just doing to check a box. Some of the prereq courses, you might not enjoy all of them, or you're just gonna have to do some of them. But as far as all the electives and other things that are incorporated within your major, you wanna make sure you actually really want to take those courses. So some of the traditional science majors at UCF, biomedical sciences, the biology track, health sciences, and then kinesiology. Is anybody in the kinesiology track? So that one we just kind of added in, so we call them the big four pre-health majors at UCF. And there's some pros to these. The pros to them is that typically the prereqs that you need for your profession overlap with your major. So as you're completing your major requirements in order to graduate, you're simultaneously completing the prereq courses that you need in order to apply to medical school, because they're kind of worked in the same plan. Does that make sense? Versus somebody that's maybe an English major they want to go to medical school, they're going to be working on their degree plan, and then as electives, they're going to have to take their science classes. It's not going to be a part of their course requirements. Does that make sense? So that's one of the major benefits from being in a traditional science major. One of the potential cons is that you're going to have a mandatory large volume of science courses. So if you ever want to not take a science course for electives, it's probably not going to have that option as much with some of these rigorous, intensive science course degree plans. That being said, that could also be a benefit because medical schools, pharmacy schools will see that you've taken rigorous science courses in your undergrad. So that's definitely going to benefit you if you do well in those courses. However, if you want to have more flexibility, if you don't want to have to take molecular cell biology as a senior or some of those other elective courses that are required for some of these harder majors, it's okay if you do something else, if you do psychology, etc. Any questions about that? No. So the most important thing, just to continue to reiterate, is that you are able to maintain a strong GPA. Regardless of what major you are, getting those A's is the most important thing, and that you're completing your prereq courses in a timely fashion, because a lot of those admissions tests that you have to take to go into medical school, pharmacy school, require that you've taken certain classes before you take that test. So there is somewhat of a timeline that you do want to keep in mind from the beginning. So strong GPAs. I've used this kind of term a lot. What is a competitive GPA for most pre-health profession programs? 4.0? That's a one good guess. Any other good guess? 3.9? Okay, so you guys have really high expectations of yourself, which is great. You want to have a high expectation. Professional schools don't expect you to be perfect, but they do want you to have a high standard. They expect a lot from you. So for most health profession programs, 3.5 or higher is competitive. And that's for your overall GPA and then also your science GPA. So your science GPA is basically where the admissions committee will look at your transcript, they'll pull out all of your science courses and then recalculate a GPA just for those courses. So both the science GPA and your overall GPA need to be in that 3.5 or higher range, with the exception of MD programs. For MD programs, you're looking at a 3.7 or higher to be competitive. So for those of you that mentioned medical school, if you're considering MD, your standard is just slightly higher in order to be competitive for their schools. Any questions about what types of GPAs you guys should be aiming for? So prerequisite courses. What is a prereq course? I'm sorry? Yes. So these are classes specifically outlined by the admissions committee that you have to take in order to apply, like meet the application requirements for a school. You also not only have to take them, but it is important that you pass them. So for for all of these prereq courses, you need to make sure that you're earning a C or higher in order to satisfy the minimum requirement. As a pre-health student, your goal should be to get A's in your courses. C's should not be something that is meeting your expectations. So even though a C is passing the course and would probably be fine for most other students that are looking just to get a degree and graduate and move on to another job, for you as a pre-health student, you have to set your expectation just a little bit higher. So in these prereq courses, taking them and doing well in them. The most common prereqs for health profession school are the following. Biology, typically biology 1 and biology 2. General chemistry 1 and 2 with the lab. Organic chemistry 1 and 2 with the lab. Biochem. Physics 1 and 2. Anatomy, physiology, micro, and genetics. And then also behavioral sciences. So this is just kind of an overarching list of classes that are most common for health profession schools. However, prerequisite courses vary by profession. So this is not the case. All this list here, it's a combination of these typically for a profession. So for medical school, for example, it's biology, the chemistries, physics, math, and behavioral science. Anatomy, micro, genetics, those are not required. For PA school, some of those specific ones are required. So it does vary by profession. So we do recommend that you come in to meet with an advisor in our office, either in a walk-in or an actual appointment, so that we can discuss your profession with you. Pharmacy, for example, one of the interesting prereqs for pharmacy is an economics course. So things like that you could probably find out on your own if you do a lot of research, but we do have completed documents that have all of the professional schools in Florida and their required courses. So just we did a lot of research for you, so it's just helpful to kind of get you started. Any questions about the prereq classes? Yeah.
Is genetics typically by the traditional med student taking around sophomore year?
So genetics is not a required prereq for medical school.
Okay.
So that's kind of an optional. If you want to take it, you can take it at any point before you graduate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Class like immunology.
I'm sorry?
Class like immunology.
Immunology.
Is that requirements for school?
For med school, it's not. Nope. So where immunology and genetics would fall in for medical school is with the biology requirement. So for biology, for medical school, it's the only profession that kind of has a little bit of flexibility. They require that you take Bio 1, and then you need to have a second biological science. So if you want to use genetics to complete that requirement, you can. If you want to use immunology to complete that requirement, you can do that also. Or you could take Bio 2. But for a lot of the other health professions, pharmacy, PT, PA, Bio 1 and Bio 2 are required. So this is just kind of a general outline, but it is important for your specific profession to get the actual list that you need so you don't miss something. One thing to keep in mind, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, is the timing of your prereqs, so especially the ones that are dependent on each other. The chemistry sequence is one of the ones that's the longest to complete and can really affect the timeline of when you apply. Does anybody know the order of the chemistry classes from Gen Chem to Biochem at UCF?
Chem 1 and 2,
Mm-hmm.
then orbital, and biochem.
And then Biochem. So depending on if you can take Gen Chem 1 in one semester, or if you're taking Chem 1A and Chem 1B, that entire sequence will take you up to 5 or 6 semesters to complete. So if you're starting that your junior year, that's really affecting your timeline for your application, because you have to push that back in order to be ready to take the MCAT or whatever professional test you're taking in order to be ready. So it is important that you know these classes early on so that you can make a plan to get them completed pretty quickly. You don't want to rush through them. You still want to make sure your schedules are balanced so that you're getting those A's, but that you're not prioritizing other classes, electives or things like that. It is really important that you prioritize your prereqs so that you can be ready to take that admissions test. Make sense? So yes, this is the chemistry sequence, 5 to 6 semesters. Another thing that can be really helpful, just kind of a little plug here for shadowing, is to get started in that sooner, because there are some variations in the prereqs, it can be helpful the sooner you know for sure which way you want to go. If you think for sure you want to go to med school, I would definitely say one of the first things to do is start shadowing some doctors sooner rather than later, because then you're really going to know, okay, medical school looks good on paper, it looks good online, it sounds good when I'm talking to my friends, but when I get in the environment with a doctor, do I actually see myself doing this every day? Is this what I thought it was going to be? Before you spend all this time taking classes that you may or may not need, or investing in a lot of other things that may or may not be what you want to do. extracurricular experiences for PA students is different than medical students. So it's just better to kind of jump into the discovery process a little bit earlier on than saving shadowing and things like that. Oh, I'll do that later. I'll do it my senior year, my junior year. I say starting out with shadowing your freshman, sophomore year is really going to help you know how to direct the rest of your time. So shadow a variety, shadow MD, shadow DOs, shadow PAs. You don't have to stick to just one profession at the beginning. At the beginning, explore. If you even think you have an interest in something, shadow them. And then as you kind of confirm where you want to go, then you want to focus in on just those MDs or just those pharmacists. Does that make sense? So starting your upward trend. Does anybody know what I mean when I say upward trend? Or have any thoughts? What could it be? So it has to do with your transcript. Essentially, it means these three things. When, in a nutshell, when an admissions committee member is looking at your transcript on your application, they're going to look down a line and they're going to see the letter grades that you've earned in every class. Ideally, you want to see A, B, A. Sometimes you see C, D, W, A, B, like the whole alphabet is listed on somebody's transcript. And at the beginning, wherever you're at right now, the goal is to be able to move forward. So what they say, an upward trend, is basically at a certain point as you're going down that line, they see that it goes up. Instead of having an A and a B and a C trend that goes up and down, you start to have a trend that takes off and becomes more consistent in receiving higher grades. Does that make sense? So receiving consistently good grades in your courses, increasing difficulty in your courses is something as well. So as you progress into your junior and your senior years, it's important that you are taking upper level courses. Some students will say, is it okay if I go back and I take organic at Valencia or something like that? Ideally, once you've moved to a 4-year university, it's best to stay at a 4-year university because the rigor is a little bit higher, and professional schools will see if you have gone back to a community college and taken a course there. There are some extenuating circumstances when maybe it is in your better interest to go to a community college if taking courses at the 4-year university are a hardship to you. That's something that we could talk about in a personal advising appointment. But on the whole, they want to see that you're continuing to take those upper level courses instead of going back down to the community college level. Does that make sense? And then also maintaining a full course load. So that's 12 or more courses per semester. Why do you think that that would be important to these programs? Yeah.
Because in med school, at least for example, I think you're taking up to 25, 30 credit hours. So you need to make sure that you can handle at least a decent course load.
Exactly. So in med school, it's going to be full-time. So they need to make sure that what you've done at the undergrad level, that you've experienced a little bit of that before they just throw you into 8 to 5 classes Monday through Friday of med school level content. So essentially, undergrad is evidence to health profession programs for how you're going to perform. So they want your undergrad experience to mimic as much as possible what that experience is going to be like in the future so that they can see how successful you're going to be. That's why they care about your grades. That's why they care about your pre-req classes and things like that, is because they want to see if you can do it at that level, then you can handle medical school. If you can't do it at that level, you might not be able to be as successful as what you think you might be able to do. Does that make sense? Health profession schools will dissect your transcript, so nothing will be hidden. Everything will be laid bare. Once you earn a grade, that grade is always going to be on your transcript, even if you do grade forgiveness. So grade forgiveness is something that UCF offers to students. If you do poorly in a course, you want to retake it. They'll basically say, yes, you can retake it, and we'll take whichever score is higher. However, that only goes towards your UCF GPA. Both grades will stay on your permanent transcript, but UCF will only accept the higher one when they calculate your UCF GPA, which is a culmination of all the classes you've taken at UCF. On your transcripts for professional school, it will incorporate all of the grades you received anywhere at any point, anytime. Retakes will show up as your original score, and then whenever you took the next class that you retook, it will just show up as another line item. So they don't average, they don't replace each other, it will just show up as another class. Does that make sense? So that's why it's important to build that foundation right now. So I might have got into some of these already. So what if you've already had some mistakes? What if your record's not perfect right now, you did dual enrollment, you didn't know what you were doing in high school, and you already have some C's on your transcripts? That happens so often. So what do you do if that happens to you, or if you're in that situation? First, we need to find, I guess, what is doing well. For pre-health students, A's and some B's. So if you got a C in a class, I would not consider that doing well for you as a pre-health student. So if you're not doing well, meaning getting A's and B's, plan A. If you're not in that boat, prevent it from happening. Buffer yourself from getting those C's. Make a study plan, form a study group, etc. Go to your professor's office hours, talk with your TAs, utilize SARC. But plan B, if you already have those grades, come and talk with us. There's not a one-size-fits-all answer to your situation. So you really need to sit down with a professional and talk about what the circumstances were, what your circumstances are now, and what's your best plan of action in order to improve. So there's not a, this is exactly what you need to do, because it may differ for each person. But that's why our office is here. We can pull up your transcript and really have a conversation about what happened, where do you want to go, and what's the best way to get there. And do all those things that we already mentioned. So one of the things that we will say to you is, do you have a study group? Do you talk with your professors? Do you sit at the front of the class? Do you talk with your TAs? Have you ever been to SARC? Do you know what SARC is? Have you been to an SI session? UCF has a ton of resources that are available to you, and it can be really intimidating as a first year or second year student here to take advantage of some of those things. But as a pre-health student, you have to. I don't know a single pre-health student that has gotten from day one of UCF to graduated from UCF without having used any one of those resources in order to be where they want to be. So if you are in that situation, or even if you haven't gotten that situation, just make sure that you're being intentional about taking your grades seriously. What about a withdrawal? Does withdrawal matter? How to medical schools, pharmacy schools, PT schools, what do they think when they see a W on your transcript? One withdrawal is not a huge deal. One withdrawal on your entire transcript is not the end of the world. Some students will freak out about one time. While it's not great, it's not, like I said, not a huge concern. More than one withdrawal tends to become a trend. So once something starts happening consecutively, that's when it becomes a bigger deal. That would potentially raise concern on your transcript. So trying to prevent withdrawals as much as possible by doing well in your classes from the beginning, where you don't feel the pressure of having to withdraw, is the best thing that you can do, because you don't want to raise any red flags on your application. However, W's are better than failing grades. So if it does get to be the end of the semester and you know that you're going to get a D, or you know that you're going to get an F, it is better to have a W than to have a D or an F on your transcript. So that is one kind of blanket statement we will put out there. But kind of going back to number 2, more than one W is a trend, and that's not a good trend to have. Make sense? Any questions about withdrawals? No. A's. So grade forgiveness, we talked about this already. Do you guys have any questions about grade forgiveness? No? Yeah,
Is it better than a W?
I'm sorry.
Is it better than a W?
It's grade forgiveness. So grade forgiveness would not, it wouldn't be simultaneous, like it wouldn't be interchangeable with a W. So for example, if you take chemistry and you get a D in chemistry, if you use grade forgiveness, basically what will happen is the next semester you'll retake chemistry and hopefully you earn an A. In that situation, for professional school applications, both grades are going to show up on your transcript, the D and the A. For grade forgiveness, basically what UCF does is they said, okay, you retook it, you got the A, we're going to take the D off of your record for UCF.
So it would be better to have a W and then next semester.
Yeah. So if you think you're going to fail a class, using grade forgiveness is not really an option. It's an option for students that are not applying to medical school or PA school, etc. But for pre-health students, using grade forgiveness is not going to cover up that failing grade. It's just going to add another grade to your list. So in that case, it would probably be better to go ahead and withdraw from that course. If you ever feel like that's going to happen to you on that last withdrawal week, don't let it come to that point first before you come and talk to somebody, because you should know if you're not doing well in a class before withdrawal week. But if you do plan to withdraw, come and touch base with one of us. We usually have a lot of extra walk-in hours that week, so just run it by somebody before you just start withdrawing from a lot of classes. But yeah, having a W is definitely better than having both a failing grade and an A. Yeah, good question. Any other questions about withdrawals? or grade forgiveness? Student Academic Resource Center. SARC. Has anybody been to SARC? A couple people, most everybody. Perfect. So where is SARC located? Downstairs. Cool. Yes, so SARC is located downstairs, and they have a ton of free support services available to students. Most of our pre-health students take advantage of their services because they do have a lot of tutoring or SI classes specifically for your STEM courses. So they have peer tutoring where you can be in a group peer tutoring lesson, or you can actually schedule a one-on-one. So if you're not great in a group and you really want that individual conversation, you can schedule a one-on-one appointment. You just need to make sure you plan in advance for it, but I think you can schedule that online or in person. SI, supplemental instruction, these are basically like extra little mini classes outside of the regular classroom taught by previous students who did really well in that course. So it's more classroom style and should kind of reiterate what you're already learning in class. Online peer assisted learning. So this is really great, this is new. Basically similar tutoring, just online. So if coming in person doesn't work for you, then online resources. So for commuters, if you live far and coming back on campus for something like this, there is an opportunity for you to receive the same assistance online. So before we kind of go into these next ones, these three are all different types of tutoring. The reason why they have so many different types is because everybody learns differently. So like I mentioned, maybe group works for you, maybe online is more convenient, maybe you like the classroom lecture style. So try them all out and kind of see what works best for you. But at the end of the day, there's not really a lot of excuses why somebody who's not doing well in a class can't take advantage of one of these options. They're available to you online, they're available to you in person, they're available at different times. You can schedule your own time. So it would really take a lot of convincing to me if somebody came to me and was like, Courtney, I am failing a class and I've done everything I can to try to pull my grade up. I will ask them if they've tried any of those things because we have so many resources, it's just a matter of kind of reaching out and taking advantage of them. In addition to all of the supplemental instruction type of services, they also offer a learning skills consultation. This is basically where they'll put you through a series of activities so you can kind of figure out how you learn best. So if you're not getting the results you want in your classes, like you feel like you're studying and you keep getting C's on tests, or even if you're getting B's and you're like, what can I do to study better? I highly recommend doing something like this. You'll just set it up at a time that works for you, and they'll basically at the end of it kind of tell you what type of learner you are. Are you an auditory learner? Are you a hands-on learner? Are you a read-write learner? Are you visual? And that's important because maybe what you're doing is auditory. You're just going to class and listening to lectures, but maybe you're hands-on. Maybe you need to actually do something with your hands, make flashcards, do something mobile in order to learn. Or maybe you're a visual person. Maybe you need to be able to actually read the textbook and kind of see graphics and things like that. And they can help you tweak your learning style so that you can be even more successful. Because sometimes that's half the battle is people feel like you have to study only one way. You just have to sit and take notes, and that's the only way to study. And there's actually a lot of other ways to do that, and everybody learns a little bit differently. They have academic coaching and engagement. This is a little bit broader, so it encompasses more than just academics. It also incorporates kind of in the field experiences, so how can you connect real life experiences that you might be a part of to the classroom. Workshops, they have a study union and access program. I'm not super familiar with the access program, but that's kind of a full list of their services and their website, and it is downstairs. Any questions about SARC? Okay, so we're gonna transition to the admissions exam. Who knows what the admissions test is for medical school?
The MCAT.
Yes. What about podiatry school? Okay. What about dental school? Do we have any pre-dental in here? No? DAT? That's for pharmacy. The PCAT? Optometry? OAT? Do we have any PA? No? GRE? Chiropractic? No test. So if you don't want to take a test, you should consider going into chiropractic school. So when do you take it? Now that you know what your test is, when are you supposed to take this test?
End of junior year.
Kind of. Who said that? In the junior year. Yeah, so kind of. That is the fastest you could take it. Sometimes that's the best person for that. Sometimes that's the best timing. Sometimes it's not. It just kind of depends. But you definitely can't do it any sooner than the end of your junior year. If you took it like the summer after your junior year, you would basically be kind of setting yourself up to go straight into that professional school after you graduate, which again is the fastest you could do it. For some people, it's a little bit later. The best answer is when you're ready. So how do you know if you're ready? You need to make sure that you've taken the classes that are covered on your test. So the MCAT, for example, for chemistry, you need to have all of your chemistries up through biochem done. You need to have all of your physics done. You need to have your biology done and your psychology done before I would even think about studying for this test. So the most important thing right now is just to focus on your pre-req classes, do well in them, know which ones of them are going to be covered on the MCAT, and then once you finish those classes, then we say study for about 3 to 6 months after you finish those classes, and then you'll take the test. So to give a little bit of an example, pre-med students, like I mentioned, those are all the required classes that are for pre-med students as well as for the MCAT. Then you would study for the MCAT, then you would take the MCAT. So, based on everything that we've read so far, what we've talked about, when do you think you should start studying for your test?
As you go through the major.
Nope.
Right after you finish, the final courses.
Yes.
Big.
So after you finish the courses that are gonna be covered on your test. So that's gonna be different for each test. The DAT for dental students, their test that covers biology, chemistry, and organic chemistry. So once they finish those classes, they can start studying for the DAT. The MCAT's kind of listed up here. So that's where it starts to get specific by profession. So you wanna know which classes you need for your profession and then which areas are gonna be tested on the admissions test. Once you finish all of those classes, then study. Make sense? The goal, how many times do you want to take this test? Ideally once. Once you get a fabulous score and you never have to put yourself through that again. It's stressful, it's expensive, and it goes on your permanent record. So if you take the MCAT once, you don't do great on it, that score is never going away. So you will need to probably take it again at that point. We wouldn't ever want somebody to get a low score and just kind of leave it hanging without trying a retake. But you should never go into a test planning to retake or go into it thinking, oh, I'm just gonna try this once, see how I do, and then I'm gonna actually study the second time around. Because all of your scores are going on your official record. So you just wanna make sure that the first time you take it, you really put in effort to study and prep. And ideally, that works out for you and you don't have to go through that process again. Any questions about the admissions exam? Okay, so this entire workshop designed for first and second year students is to kind of give you some really high expectations so that you can set yourself up for success right now. So your goals in these first 2 years is to take your prereqs and to build a solid foundation in your GPA. As you get higher in credit hours, at that point, if you're trying to correct your GPA, it gets a lot harder because you already have a lot of hours that are making up your GPA. So if you add in just a few more hours, it's not gonna move the needle as much. But right now in your first couple of years, you're really building a foundation for yourself that as a junior and senior, you can just continue to build on top of. But it's a lot harder to fix your GPA later on down the road than really kind of set yourself up for success right now. So these years are academically probably the most important years you're gonna have. At this point in the process, focusing on your academics should be your number one priority. Extracurriculars are kind of a second priority to that, but academics right now should be number one. And then your admissions tests, MCAT, PCAT, etc., that should all be on the back burner. Because if you're in your first or second year, you're probably not quite close enough to be worrying about studying for that yet. If you are, come and talk to us. We'll help make a plan for you, but on the whole, that's where most first and second year students are at. Yeah.
Would an A minus do considered an A?
An A minus, yes. An A minus I think is considered, if you get a 3.2, I think. So it's like, there's a grading scale. If you Google UCF grading scale, it will tell you the letter grade and what number it gives you. So it's not necessarily a matter of whether it's called an A or not. I mean, it will show up as an A minus literally on your transcript, but then as far as your actual GPA number, you'll want to kind of see exactly what UCF awards to that. A's are usually 4.0, B's are usually 3.0. So it would be kind of somewhere in there. I don't know if it's like a 3.7 maybe is where it's at, and then a B plus is like a 3.2, 3.3. Those are all kind of estimates, but if you Google UCF grading scale, it'll have it like specifically listed. Yeah. So every class, every grade, every time, they're all gonna show up. So just make sure that right now, what is the best thing you can do as a pre-health student is just be really successful academically. It's gonna make the rest of your pre-health life so much easier. We do have a couple of additional workshops coming up that would specifically be helpful for this group of students. The time management is coming up next week on Thursday. SARC's actually gonna be presenting on that, so if that's something you feel like would be beneficial to you, you have that. And then the other half of being a competitive applicant, like I mentioned a little bit, is your extracurricular activities. That's second priority to your academics right now, but it is kind of good to know what you need to do with your extracurriculars. So we are gonna have a workshop for that in April. So towards the end of this semester. The reason being, again, so you can focus on your grades, and then as you go into the summer in your sophomore, junior year, you can start to plan for some of those extracurriculars. And this is our contact information. Our office is just one office forward. So if you go out of here and you just go to the left, we're right there. That's where you come for appointments, for walk-ins, for a lot of the other things that we do. To make an appointment, you will need to either come in person and schedule or call over the phone. We don't do any appointment scheduling via email, just because by the time we email you or you email us and we respond back with a date, that date's probably already taken. We do fill up usually about a month in advance. So right now our next appointments are like the end of February. So it is important, if you do want to get in, to try to schedule an appointment a little bit in advance, and know that if you came in today and wanted something next week, it doesn't usually have that quick of a turnaround time, just because UCF is so large. So just kind of think about 3 to 4 weeks out. And we do also have walk-in hours if that's quicker. Walk-in appointments are like 15 minutes, and the schedule for that's on our website, the PHPL advising at ucf.edu. Do you guys have any questions for me? No? Okay, was this helpful?
Yes.
Good, okay. I have really, really high standards for my pre-health students. So I say A a lot, and then I'll have somebody coming to me crying like, Courtney, I got a B, what am I gonna do? Can I go to medical school? And I tell them yes. So know that I have really high standards on you guys so that you can aim for the best. But if something does happen or you're not doing well, no, it's not necessarily the end of the road, but it is something that you want to try to avoid and have conversation with us. So best of luck. Thanks for being here, and you guys have a good rest of your day.